All right. So you asked how you might be able to create parts that might not print as well on their own if they were all one solid thing, but would be easier to print them separately and then glue them together. Now, a couple things about this. I just drew up a sketch that mimicked one of the examples there. And obviously, first, this needs to be moved in position. Cool. Okay. So select there, move, and we'll have this snap over. Nope, I don't want the faces. I want the whole body. There we go. So I'll move that over in position. So this would just be kind of like a kickstand design like you're working with. Great. Okay. Now I will also be demonstrating how to use the pattern, rectangular pattern for this. Because what we want to do is I want to make some little tabs in this piece, one or the other, basically the interlock like Legos. Now, does that mean that it has to be that tight a fit? No. Is it possible? Definitely. But it'd be easier to have if you were going to attach different parts after printing with like super glue is really one of the best things because it's just a simple bonding glue. But if they're just pressing parts together, it's very easy to slide them around and they'll glue in the wrong spot. But if it has any kind of like a little nub or some kind of interlock, it's going to stay put in place. One, the glue will stay more easily in place, but also it'll just make that much of a stronger connection. So what do you want to do for that? Honestly, it doesn't matter. Pardon me. But easiest thing is you could draw like some circles, a little rectangle, whatever, but don't make them straight extrusions. This is really where the taper tool comes in handy. So I'm going to draw it on the back side of one of these little legs. So just to make things easier on myself, make sure we'll do leg 01 or lead apparently because I couldn't see under the cursor. Leg. And stand. Cool. Now I'm going to hide the stand part first because what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw on this surface here. So I'm going to go to the front there, create sketch. Now, because this is a rounded object, I might not be able to draw on there. That's okay. I'll figure that out later. So realistically, the best thing is I could draw on this on the origin plane and move it over. Now, this is something we're going to talk about in the next project, but a little quick insight will help. So instead of drawing on the origin plane, and because this is a curved surface, I want to be able to draw on that, but it's not letting me because Fusion doesn't like to draw directly on curved surfaces. So instead of creating the sketch first, I'm going to create what's called an offset plane. Now, on your construction tools, we haven't talked about this at all yet, but should be the default tool on the toolbar. What this does is it creates a plane like your origin, only you can move it away. So construction plane, you select your standard set of planes just like normal. I want the ZX axis, so like I'm the wall in front of you. Select there. Now you can offset it, and I can use it with a slider, or I can extend to object, just like we've experimented with other stuff. Now, again, I'm going to have trouble selecting because it's a curved surface. However, usually if you can get a corner, you're good. Selected that corner, vertice, great. Now I can see there's a construction plane right there. It was 30 millimeters, it was even, but anytime you can use a reference point and not have to measure, hey, I'm all for the lazy snap away. Let the program do the work. Okay, cool. Now I can draw on that plane. Create sketch. Now I can work directly there. Now I got somewhere to work with. So I'll just make like a rectangle. And I'll use a 2-point rectangle, be a little bit easier. I can see, let me change my view settings here so I can see what I'm doing. That didn't help. View style, we'll go with wireframe. Not really a big help either. All right, whatever. So I still can mouse over my grid and it'll let me snap. They don't need to be huge. So I'll just do something there. Now you can just see where the red highlights over. It's easier if I tumble over. You can see where the grid is exposed down here. That means it's no longer a flat spot. So I'm going to say, I'll tab over, do 10 for that. Yep, 10 works. Great. Now, since I typed it in, the little lock icon comes up. Great. So that means it's locked in place. Now, tab back over, and I want that to be, since I'm using the grid snaps, I did 2 millimeters in from one side. I'll do 2 millimeters in from the other. And it's not snapping for whatever reason. That's mildly irritating. But it looks to be 3, so we'll just type in 3. Great. Oakley dokley. Okay, Ned Flanders there. That was super. All right. Sketch is complete. That's all I need. Great. Now, is that joined onto that surface? No. But it is on the same plane as that surface. So when I extrude this sketch, I can join it. Click extrude. Yep, definitely that. And it doesn't need to be large. We'll say like 2. Sure. 2 millimeters works. Now, like I said before, you don't want just a straight cylinder or rectangle. Definitely use the taper. Also, operation, I want this to join. Okay. Taper angle, we'll try -1. Not enough. Let's bump it up to like -5. Yeah, that's not bad. We'll see what a little bit more looks like. -8. -10. That'll work better. Basically, a taper will allow the parts to lock in more easily, but you're not fighting against it being perfectly square. Because if it's perfectly square, if you don't have the sizes right, then you're going to have to do some sanding and such. But that'll work. Cool. And I do want join because I want that part to be exposed, or I want that little tab to actually be part of the leg. Now, would it have been better to make it part of the body? Actually, in this case, no. It would be better to be part of the leg. And the reason for that is the leg is only so thick, whereas when I unhide the stand is much thicker. That's cool. That's what I want. Okay. Now, remember when we were talking about using the combine tool and doing a cut, but wanting to keep the tool? This is exactly when you would want to do that. So I'm going to go to combine, target body. I want it to operate on the stand. You can select it by just clicking on it, or again by the hierarchy tree. Great. Tool body, that leg. I want to cut, but I want it to keep that tool because otherwise it's going to delete that whole leg. But now it'll keep that and it'll make that chopped out recess. Okay. Let it calculate. There we are. So now when I hide the leg, now there's that little recess. Yeah, there was a little bit of an overlap. I should have moved it over a little bit, but that's okay. So just like before, though, when we were doing the Revolve project, would it have made more sense to move all of these or do all of these at once? Like make duplicates of the leg and then cut it all in, or duplicates of all the features? In this case, honestly, it doesn't really matter. You're going to end up having to do 2 things because you're going to have to do 2 operations. So in this case, it may well have been better to do the make your multiples first. Well, the good thing is you can still go back in your history slider and just basically splice that in. So I'm going to move my history slider back before I made that final cut into the stand. So when I hide the leg, not there now. Now I can use the rectangle pattern. So create pattern, rectangle pattern. You can select not the faces. Make sure you're selecting bodies. I want that whole thing there. Great. Now, this is where it gets a little confusing because if you mouse over the rectangle pattern, it'll show you it's made for making basically like a grid of parts. And it doesn't automatically bring up a slider. So that's kind of problematic. So if you're confused as to what you're doing, just start typing in parts at the first object that's already highlighted. Go from there. Directions, you can select directions, but if it's inside, it's a little bit confusing. I want this in the X direction. So when I select it in the toolbox directions, if you can zoom in, or if you need to hide that body so you can get to the X axis, there you go. Unhide the stand. Now the sliders appear. So that's what I mean by it's a little confusing at first, but like most of these tools in Fusion, if you just start working your way down the toolbox, usually your answer will appear for you. Now I have my sliders and I can see what I'm doing. Now I can draw out, make multiples. Now for the current setting, they're going to be evenly spaced because what I'm putting in is distance type is the overall distance. Well, let me try a different one. Instead of that, let me try spacing. Now I can try spacing it. They're all going to be evenly spaced so far apart. So if I change that to like 30, they're going to evenly space themselves 30. So with this part, I would choose the extent. That would probably make the most sense. And this part gets a little problematic, but you can do standard stuffs like directional, all of that such. This is where you kind of need to have some measurements already in place. Now, remember, you can always go back and change that, so that'll be okay. But like if I was trying to decide, well, how far is this apart? Yeah, that does honestly get a little confusing. But what I can do here is, let me see if it'll let me actually do a measurement while I'm in a tool. No, but that's okay. I can go back and adjust that. So I'm going to use a measurement, select to there and to there. That's 10.4 millimeters. Okay. So what is my overall? Nope. Went from there to there. Oh, let me clear this all out here. How wide was this? 100 millimeters. Okay. So that means that measurement probably should have been more like, instead of 75, that rectangle tool or the rectangle pattern probably should have been 80. So right click in that. I'll close this out. Right click in there, edit feature. That's much too much. How dare you be wrong, math? I guess 75 was about right. Strange. Okay, well, we'll just go with that. Okay. All right, so we've got the legs, multiple legs now, but there's no feature in there. Now let's see. When I move the history slider forward, is that going to recalculate and give me features on all those, or just that first one? Just the first one. Crud. Okay. So what that means is now I can go in, edit feature, and I can just repeat what I did. So still that target body, tool bodies. Now let's do all 3 of those legs. Still keep the tools. Just changed it around. Now there's those tabs in place. That's pretty much it. So simple way of adding tabs into features. Now when you went to export these, well, for one, you could export just the stand on its own. Should go up, go to File, 3D Print. Remember, you want to do these separately because you're creating individual parts. And then you don't have to export each one of these legs individually unless they were all unique. You can just export one with a 3D print tool, and then we just make sure you print enough of the legs you need.
Oh, cool.
So that's how you can make tabs and such and interlocking parts. Obviously, it's a really simplified way, but when it comes down to it, it's a pretty simple, at the moment, pretty simple way of working.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.